3 under-the-radar acquisitions. We're calling this what you called it, the KCP acquisition. And for context, the trade Denver made last year, Monty Morris and Will Barton going to Washington, bringing over KCP, didn't get a lot of attention, didn't get a lot of credit at the time, but it certainly made a huge impact on the Denver Nuggets and their championship run. You're approaching this in what way for these three acquisitions?
I'm approaching these 3 acquisitions as guys that can tip a championship.
Okay,
that can be an additive piece to a team that we will be playing in June. Yours is a little bit different.
Yeah, I looked at it as 3 guys who I think will make an impact on winning and make a team better. One of which maybe it's an Eastern Conference team that makes it into the top 6. One of which maybe it's a Western Conference team that makes it into the top 6. And then one of which is the Lakers. And we all know they're trying to play for a championship. So why don't you start? We'll start with your first under-the-radar KCP acquisition of the offseason.
So my first one, who we have mentioned many times on the show, you mentioned on the broadcast of the NBA draft. He's a member of the OM3 Fantasy League. Minivan Georges Niang. Career 40.3 3-point shooter. Cavs obviously signed him to a 3-year deal this summer. They also signed Strus, who I think fits for this, but I think Strus was a little more George is a little more under the radar.
Yeah,
I think Max
fair.
was a big free agent acquisition for them, is going to start for them. The Cavs, obviously they shot 32% from 3 in the playoffs, 36% on the season. They need this. They need defensive rebounding and they need 3-point shooting. George has also played with Donovan before. He knows how to make it work in a system like that. I expect him to be good during the regular season, and I expect him to have a couple of moments in the playoffs. I think we're both probably pretty high on that team overall if they can get some things figured out. And so, if you tell me like George wins them a game or 2 in May,
yeah,
like this is what this conversation is about, is guys like this.
The other thing I would point out with George is how valuable he is to have on your team. Something I've spoken about a few times. You need guys that come to work every day, that have a personality. The season is such a grind. You need Georges Niangs on your team. You need guys that can lighten the mood, that have some shit to them. They're going to talk shit in a random practice in February when all anybody is thinking about is All-Star break. Like for morale, and he's a good player. I'm not saying he's just a personality, but he's important for the locker room and the team chemistry and dynamic as well. So I like the pick, but we have talked about it before. Yeah. My first one is, I think really under the radar, even though he's historically, I think, the best 3-point shooter in terms of percentage in NBA history, and that's Seth Curry. So Seth had ankle surgery in May of 2022, and that was when he was coming off the best season of his career. Averaged 15 a game for Philly, averaged just under 15 a game in the 19 games he played in with Brooklyn after the trade. Has ankle surgery, comes back after the season has already started, which is always difficult to not have the normal routine, the training camp, the early season, the preseason, all that stuff. So, he had a fine season. Minutes were down. I don't think he was ever really himself last season. Still shot 40.5% from 3. The reason I love this, last time he was in Dallas, which was 2019-2020 season, he shot 45.2% from 3, averaged a little over 12 a game. He was 48.1% on catch and shoot threes. And when you think about the way this offense is going to function, it will primarily be pick and roll and ISO. That is what Kyrie does. That is what Luka does. And so having him as one of your spot-up shooters, having him maybe even some movement sets, the hand back to Luka coming off a flare screen, like they're going to figure out ways to use him. I don't know that he starts, but I think he helps this team. And a couple things on Dallas. When they made that run to the Western Conference Finals 2 seasons ago, it was primarily, switchable defenders and shooting. And they had some outlier series in terms of their shooting percentages, but they were 8th in 3-point shooting percentage last year, 3rd in makes. There's an emphasis to give Luka and Kyrie the ball. Everybody else space the floor. Seth fits perfectly on this team, I think. And look, some of this, of course, is how much is this ankle going to bother him long term? There certainly defensive question marks, as there have been at certain times in his career. But I like a healthy Maxi Kleber, Grant Williams addition. Josh Green came on strong last year, had a much improved third season. He's another guy that shot over 40% last year. This is a Dallas team that was 6 overall in offense. Like, there's a lot to like.
And do you think
about this Seth Curry acquisition? And do you think
some of the guys you just mentioned, like Green and Grant in particular, they can cover up some of the size issues?
Yeah, I mean, again, to me, they're going to have some defensive issues because Luka is not always engaged. Sometimes doesn't run back on defense. We all know he likes to talk to the officials and have conversations with them while transition baskets are happening at the other end. Probably my only knock on Luka, right? Kyrie, I thought last year, prior to the trade, was super engaged defensively in Brooklyn. I went to a number of games, but there's a size issue there. So I think it does come down to Maxey and Grant specifically. I don't know how much you're going to get out of a rookie Derek Lively protecting the rim. So it comes down to those two guys figuring out ways to anchor the defense. And I brought up anchoring the defense, I think 2 years ago when I talked about Mikal Bridges. And we so often think of centers being the anchor. And I said my argument was that they had a top 5 or 6 defense in Phoenix, and it was Mikal Bridges that anchored that defense. So it doesn't always – Marcus Smart in some ways anchored that excellent defense 2 years ago. So I think it comes down to Grant Williams and Maxi Kleber being the guys that can anchor that defense. I love it. All right, who do you got for your third guy?
All right, you might not like my third one either because we have talked about him as well. But I think that he has been underrated. It's been an underrated pickup nationally. And part of why I was thinking this was during FIBA, and this is Eric Gordon. I was thinking about this during FIBA because Eric Gordon was playing for the Bahamas during FIBA with DeAndre Ayton, balling as he has his entire basketball career, going back to high school. And I think a lot of people were watching it and they forgot that he signed with the Suns. They forgot that he was on that. They forgot that he signed there for a minimum with the Suns. So Eric Gordon, he was, he obviously got traded to the Clippers last year. He's part of the reason why they beat the Suns. 19 points in game one, in the game where they did beat them. He averaged 10.2, 41, 35, 83 splits in the playoffs. He's just a guy off the bench who can create his own shot. And we know with the Suns, they're going to sink or swim with that big 3 or big 4, or however you want to call it. That's the metric of whether they're going to win a championship or not. But their bench was objectively a disaster last year. We've talked about some of the other pickups and some of the upside about some of those other pickups. But I'm basically like, if you can get similar production from Eric that he's had his entire career, that's like a stabilizing force on a team where you know what you're going to get health aside. You know what you're going to get with those starters. And you know what they're going to give you. And so when we even talk about depth and talk about like a team like the Lakers and how the Suns are going to have to match up with them, he almost is a bigger, not question, he's a bigger factor for them. Having a stabilizing force in the bench is a bigger factor for them in a playoff series against a team like Denver, a team like the Lakers, than anything you're going to get from a Beal or from any of the starters.
It's interesting. You make a point, and I just want to add on to it, and that comes down to you said you know what you're going to get from him, and I think that more so than anything was the issue with the bench last year in the playoffs, where whether it was trust or not, because that word gets thrown around when we talk about coaches and players, like does a coach trust a player to be out there in the fourth quarter of a game 5 in the Western Conference semifinals? Like, I don't know that relationship. I will say, if I'm coaching a team, I know exactly what I'm getting from Eric Gordon, and he's a guy I would trust to play big minutes in a playoff game. I trust him on both ends of the floor. And we have discussed the fit, and it's not just about the shot creation. I don't know how much shot creation you're going to need on this team with Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant. But to me, it's the spacing, and it's the uber spacing. The guy shoots, literally, he spots from 27 or 28 feet and shoots them at a decent clip. So the fit's great. And you're right. I think sometimes we watch guys in FIBA and we're like, oh, yeah, that guy's actually really good.
Yeah.
I just forgot.
Well, he's been in this weird spot where he was a key piece of those Rockets teams,
Sure.
those great Rockets teams. And then when James left and everybody left, it's like everybody forgot about him. And he was kind of stuck in purgatory there, where he's actually playing pretty well with a bunch of young players, and it just was a bad team. And he finally gets out of there last year. And I just kind of think we're in for sort of like a Eric Gordon renaissance, where people just start to remember, oh yeah, this has been a great NBA player's entire career who's been stuck in a bad situation for the last 3 years. And when he's free from that, we're going to get to see that he's, still the same guy.
I don't want to give too much away about this week's episode of The Old Man of the Three. It's one of the most entertaining interviews I can remember doing. And it's we have two guests, and one of them, we get into a conversation about bus. And I don't love the term, and it gets thrown around so much. And certainly, expectations coming out of college or expectations coming from overseas or G League, whatever. It matters when you talk about whether or not a guy had a good career, right? But like Christian Laettner gets called a bust, and I'm like, dude, he had multiple years averaging 18 and 8. He was an all-star, like made a lot of money, played 14 years. Like, to me, Christian Laettner, was he as good as he was in college? No, but college and the NBA are two very different things.
Yeah.
We let's not put expectations on a guy based on college. And this guy kind of fits that bill because he was National Player of the Year. He was a lottery pick, but he's still young. And to me, when we talk about bus, we also need to talk about the fit on the team, the organization the person was drafted to. You hear this in the NFL all the time when you talk about, oh, this player went to the wrong team, right? This quarterback went to this team and like never really got a fair chance or whatever it may be. And to me, this is not a knock on the Knicks organization, but the way that Obi Toppin was used and the way that the Knicks want to play, more deliberate. I think they were in the bottom 5 in pace last year. It didn't fit him. It didn't suit him. And I'm excited to see him in Indiana. And look, I prefaced at the beginning of the show, I don't think this moves the needle where all of a sudden they're championship contenders. I think about this team last year, right? January 11th, they're playing at the Knicks. Going into that game, they were one of the top 6 teams in the Eastern Conference. They were 23-18. That's a large enough sample size. That's half the season. This is a good basketball team. Tyrese gets hurt. They go on a long losing streak. They never really, had a chance to make the playoffs after that. I think this could be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I really do. And one of the reasons that I love this fit, Tyrese, in terms of his ability to get out and get rebounds, get out and transition, the throw ahead passes, all this stuff, Obi Toppin running the floor, it just makes sense. Obi Toppin was 25th in the league last year in transition points per possession. This team wants to play fast. They were 5th in pace. They were 1st in transition points per game. The other thing is Obi last year, look, it's not an astronomical leap, but he averaged a career high 34.4% from 3, shot almost 4 attempts a game, both of those career highs. And I think about him in a role where it's the same thing every night, where it's not 20 minutes here, 8 minutes here, 6 minutes here, 22 minutes here. It's like, hey, dude, you're going to play 18 to 22 minutes a game. I think he shoots a better 3 percentage. I do, because there's more rhythm to it. I think he gets out in transition more. I think he gets a couple easy baskets. I think he gets some confidence from that. And so I'm excited to see him in Indiana. And I'm not willing to give up on Obi Toppin as a really good NBA player. I think he's 23 years old or something like that. Like the guy's got a lot of time ahead of him.